The shot cracked through the air like a thunderclap. The smell of leather steel and recycled cabin air was instantly drowned in the chaos. Captain Ibrahim Traoré ducked instinct, not thought, just as the bullet grazed his cheek, drawing blood. Gasps erupted. A soldier lunged from his seat. "There's an assassin on board. The shooter." A pale-skinned man in tactical beige rose from row 7 with a scoped rifle in hand. But the look on his face wasn't one of triumph. It was disbelief. Because Traoré was still standing and now staring him down with the fire of a man who had survived. Too much to fall today. The cabin wasn't a typical commercial aircraft. This was a military flight returning from a classified inspection mission across the northern border. Only senior officers, intelligence analysts, and trusted soldiers were aboard. And yet, someone had slipped through. Someone with a kill order and a plan. Traoré didn't flinch. Blood dripped down the side of his face as he calmly reached into the seat compartment, pulling out a concealed firearm. "Don't fire unless I do," he told the soldier beside him without breaking eye contact with the man holding the rifle. The assassin didn't retreat. He took a single step forward, calculated, deliberately raising the muzzle to Traorés's heart. "Tell me who sent you," Traoré said. No response. A sudden jolt, the pilot, alerted by the gunshot, initiated a sharp turn. The cabin rocked. The rifleman's stance faltered. And in that half-second, 2 soldiers surged forward and tackled him to the ground. The weapon clattered down the aisle. Chaos turned to containment. Seatbelts clicked open. Armed personnel secured the front and rear sections. Traoré remained still, blood drying on his cheek, watching as the man was restrained. He wasn't just any assassin. His gear was custom NATO grade. His boots bore no country's insignia, and his dog tags had been scorched to unreadability. This was a ghost, someone who wasn't meant to be found, only to execute and disappear. One of Traoré's officers crouched beside him. "Sir, we should land immediately." Traoré shook his head. "No, we're going home, but no one leaves this plane. No one communicates with the ground. This stays sealed until I say otherwise." He turned to the man, now zip-tied to the floor, breathing heavily, unbothered by the barrel now pressed to his temple. "You fired one?" "Shot," Traoré said coldly. "You missed." "But that wasn't the point, was it?" Still no answer. But the assassin's eyes flicked not to Traoré, but to a man seated 3 rows behind, a quiet intelligence officer, shaking, sweating. Too much. Traoré saw it instantly. "Arrest him," he said, pointing to the officer. The cabin tensed again. The officer stood up, hands trembling. Wait. I didn't. I said arrest him." Traorés's voice cut through the lies before they even formed. In seconds, 2 soldiers had him down. The assassin laughed. "Too late now," he muttered. Traoré knelt inches from the man's face. "Too late for what?" The man smiled. "You think this is about you? But you're just one of the names." For a moment, silence took the plane. Then Traoré stood. Secure the cockpit. No radio, no satellite. This plane lands at the restricted zone. No one knows we're coming. He walked back to his seat, wiping the blood from his cheek with a cloth handed to him. Calm, but not quiet. "This isn't just an assassination," he whispered. "This is a war, and it's already begun. Stay with us. This is only the beginning. What's hidden inside the assassin's jacket will shatter every assumption about the attack and reveal a deeper plan from Europe that even Traoré never saw coming." The soldier's boot pressed hard into the assassin's back as his arms were pinned behind him. His face, still expressionless, was smeared with cabin dust and blood from a shallow cut above his brow. But he didn't struggle. He didn't resist. He stared ahead at nothing, breathing steadily, as if this moment had been rehearsed 1,000 times in his mind. Around him, the once calm first-class section had dissolved into chaos. Passengers had ducked behind seats, some still sobbing, others frozen in shock. The cabin door to the cockpit had been reinforced from the inside, locked tight under Traoré's direct command. Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood just feet away, steadying himself on an armrest, eyes locked on the man who had tried to end his life. No one spoke until the lead officer securing the suspect gave the all-clear. 2 soldiers lifted the man upright, zip ties cutting into his wrists. Traoré stepped closer. "Speak." The assassin turned to him slowly. His mouth barely moved, but the words slid out like ice. "You weren't supposed to survive. It wasn't a confession. It was a statement of fact. Calculated, cold." Traoré said nothing back. He studied the man's face. Mid-30s, light eyes, clean-shaven, no distinct accent yet, but not African. His gear had no flags, no insignias, no identifying marks. He didn't carry a phone, no watch, no trace of life outside this mission. Traoré nodded to his intelligence aide. "Search him." The soldiers moved fast. In the lining of the man's vest, they found what looked like a sealed pouch of identification. One by one, the documents were pulled out and laid across the fold-out tray. 3 different passports from 3 different nations: France, Poland, Canada. Each bore a different name. Each had different birth dates, different photos, different nationalities. All were expertly forged. Then came the smaller item. Folded 4 times, tucked into a hidden slit behind the breast pocket, was a slip of paper no bigger than a receipt. The writing was typed in bold black ink, perfectly centered. It read, "Traoré, eliminate on landing." Traoré stared at the note. He said nothing, but a long breath left his lungs as if he had expected it, yet hoped to be wrong. He motioned for the soldier to hand it to him. The assassin didn't react. Not when the paper was pulled from his jacket. Not when the name was read aloud. Not even when Trey's men brought out a portable scanner to check for invisible ink or microtext. Nothing fazed him. Traoré folded the paper and slipped it into his coat pocket. Then he turned to the man again. "Is that all you were told?" "Eliminate me." The assassin blinked slowly. "No, but that's all you need to know." The quiet was suffocating. No one dared speak. Outside the windows, clouds rolled beneath the aircraft. The hum of the engine was the only constant sound in a space where tension choked the air. The assassin turned his head slightly, looking around at the soldiers, at the other passengers now peeking from their hiding spots, and finally back at Traoré. "You think this changes anything?" he said almost conversationally. "You die today or tomorrow. It won't stop what's coming." Traoré's voice was level. Was. If you knew what was coming, you wouldn't have missed. The man tilted his head as if amused by the response. "Who says I missed?" Traoré didn't flinch. "Search the cabin again. Check all luggage, every compartment. I want 2 guards on him at all times. No food, no water, no contact." "Yes, sir." As the guards dragged the assassin away to a secured section near the cargo hold, one of them hesitated. "Sir," he whispered to Traoré, "what if there's more than one?" "There always is," Traoré said without turning. "We just have to stay alive long enough to meet them." He walked slowly back to his seat, eyes scanning the faces around him. The passengers weren't just shaken. They were frightened in a deeper way, because they now understood this wasn't a hijacking or a random act of terrorism. This was a targeted execution attempt against a sitting leader in the air surrounded by his own. Traoré sat folded his hands and looked straight ahead. The blood had dried on his cheek. He made no effort to clean it. It told the story better than words could. Somewhere in the back of the aircraft, the assassin sat silently between 2 guards staring at the floor. He didn't move, didn't blink, but deep in his boot, something still remained hidden. And the mission wasn't over. The assassin had aimed directly at his heart. There wasn't time to think, only time to move. The moment the click echoed through the cabin, a sound too sharp, Too unnatural to be mistaken for turbulence or metal shifting, Ibrahim Traoré's body reacted before his mind did. He leaned left. Instinct. The bullet missed by less than an inch, slicing across his cheek, but it didn't hit its mark. And that, more than anything else, was the reason he was still breathing. But instinct doesn't come from nowhere. It's carved into the body through pain, near death, and memory. As the cabin returned to tense silence, Traoré sat quietly in his seat. The blood from the grazing wound had dried. His fingers rested on his lap, but the hand closest to the wall twitched slightly. He could still feel the weight of the old Beretta holstered behind the seat, tucked low and tight. He had placed it there without fanfare before boarding, not out of paranoia, out of pattern. And for good reason. Just 6 years earlier, in 2019, Traoré had walked through a government building with 3 bodyguards and left alone. It had been a supposed intelligence briefing in the capital arranged by an agency he no longer trusted. As he crossed the tiled hallway, one of the guards behind him collapsed. The man hadn't tripped. He'd been shot. Silenced weapon. No warning. A second guard reached for his pistol and was gunned down in the blink of an eye. Traoré had run, not because he was afraid, but because there was no value in dying without understanding who was trying to kill him. That night, he'd escaped through a maintenance tunnel used by janitors and cooks. He never forgot the sound of the footsteps echoing behind him, heavy, measured, disciplined. Whoever had come for him wasn't some rebel or thug. It was someone trained, someone sanctioned. Since that night, he never boarded a vehicle, entered a room, or took a breath without calculating his exits. He never trusted a closed space without a sidearm within reach. On flights, especially on military aircraft, he preferred aisle seats. Not for the view, but for maneuverability. His closest circle knew not to question it. But this time, what saved him wasn't just routine. It was a signal. A passenger young likely enlisted sitting 2 rows behind had shifted strangely just moments before the shot. He had turned his body toward the window, but his hand had moved across the aisle. Not toward his bag. Toward his shoe. That movement had caught Traoré's eye. Subtle, but too purposeful to ignore. In that flash, something primal inside him fired. He leaned not just out of suspicion, but because his body remembered that hallway in 2019, remembered the thud of boots behind him, remembered blood pooling on tile. He ducked, and the shot rang out. Now, as he reviewed it all in his mind, the memory of that gesture burned bright. Who was that passenger friend? Mole decoy? He couldn't be sure yet, but his eyes would find him, soon. Traoré tapped the armrest lightly, signaling one of the guards standing nearby. Have intelligence identify everyone in row 4 to 7. Names, assignments, recent deployments. Yes, sir. And the young man in the second seat from the right. Find out why he moved. Copy that. The soldier moved off without question. Traoré exhaled slowly and reached up to touch the wound on his cheek. It stung, but the pain meant nothing. What mattered was that he hadn't flinched, hadn't hesitated, hadn't failed. He looked forward, not to the cockpit, not to the guards, but to the curtain separating business class from the rear of the plane. Behind it were more soldiers, more questions, and possibly more threats. In the far end of the cabin, the assassin sat like stone, still zip-tied, still guarded. But his eyes had followed Traoré's every move since the attack. He had seen the dodge, the timing, and perhaps now he understood why this man had survived. What should have been a guaranteed kill. Traoré reached into his inner coat pocket and pulled out the folded paper. The hit order. He smoothed it out on the armrest. Eliminate on landing. That meant the bullet wasn't the only plan. That meant the fallback option was still in motion. He turned to his aide. Once we land, no handshakes, no salutes, no gatherings. I want everyone searched before they step foot near me. Yes, President Traoré nodded, eyes hardening. It wasn't just luck, and it wasn't just skill. It was the past that taught me to move. He leaned back slightly, one eye on the assassin, the other on the curtain, still gently swaying with the motion of the aircraft. "Whatever's waiting on the ground," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "They better know I'm not done learning." The lock clicked like a gun chamber, sealing the cockpit from the rest of the plane. The cabin lights dimmed for a brief second, then steadied. The voice of the pilot, firm but tense, came over the intercom. "We are no longer on our original flight plan. We are not returning to Ouagadougou. Emergency landing protocol is in effect. Destination undisclosed. All communication is disabled. This aircraft is sealed." Gasps and murmurs rippled across the cabin. The shock hadn't worn off from the earlier gunshot. Now the reality of isolation at 30,000 FT set in. No one was getting off. No one was calling home. No one knew where they were headed. Not even most of the crew. Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood in the center aisle, eyes calm, stance wide, watching his soldiers form a temporary perimeter. Rows of seats were cleared. A line of folding straps and belts stretched across the narrow walkway, forming a crude checkpoint between the forward and rear compartment. 2 armed guards stood at each side, checking badges, IDs, bags, even water bottles. "Treat this as a secure zone," Traoré ordered. "I want every movement logged. Any passenger crossing compartments must be verified by 2 others. One of his aides leaned close. "Sir, should we sedate the prisoner?" "No," Traoré replied without hesitation. "We take him alive, and we hear his truth." The assassin sat near the emergency exit, restrained and watched by 2 elite guards. His face showed no anger, no fear, only a quiet calculation, like a man watching the seconds tick before a storm hits. He hadn't spoken since his cryptic warning. "You weren't supposed to survive." But Traoré knew better than to believe silence meant surrender. From the cockpit, the pilot's voice returned. "Landing in 37 minutes. Classified coordinates. Terrain is rough. Prepare for hard descent." Traoré nodded to his security chief. "Triple-check the manifest. I want to know every name, every deployment, every transfer on this flight." "Yes, sir." "And if any passenger is missing, there won't be," the chief interrupted already halfway down the aisle with a digital tablet in hand. Traoré's eyes moved across the passengers. Most had calmed, though tension clung to every expression. An elderly intelligence officer whispered prayers under his breath. A communications tech stared at the floor, knees bouncing. A junior medic clutched her emergency pack as if it were armor. But one thing unified them all, the awareness that this flight was no longer routine. This was a battlefield in the sky. Traoré walked slowly toward the assassin. He crouched, arms resting on his knees, eyes meeting the man's level. The guards didn't move. They knew the president's rhythm. He liked to hear people breathe before they lied. "What were you promised?" Traoré asked quietly. The assassin didn't answer. Money, immunity. Or maybe something simpler. Maybe you just like killing leaders who don't take orders from Europe. Still nothing. Traoré studied his face. "You don't strike me as someone sent for a simple message. You were meant to disappear after the kill, but you failed, and now here you are, caught between the sky and the truth." The assassin blinked once slowly. "You're wasting time," he finally said. Traoré stood. "No, we're buying time." "Buying!" The pilot's voice echoed again, more urgent this time. "Approaching descent window. Prepare cabin. Repeat, prepare cabin." The soldiers double-checked harnesses, resecured weapons, and braced equipment. The plane dipped ever so slightly enough to make pens roll across tray tables and a few stomachs lurch. Traoré took one final look through the front cabin. "When we land," he said to his security chief, "there will be no ambulance, no sirens, no press, just silence and questions." The man nodded. Behind them, the curtain between cabins rustled. A guard snapped to attention. A technician stepped forward with a small metal case. "Sir," he said, "we found this under seat 23A. It wasn't scanned before takeoff. Open it." Inside were 6 untraceable cell phones, each battery removed, all identical. One vibrated softly. "Who packed this?" "No one's claiming it." Trial's expression darkened. "Tag everyone near that seat. When we land separately from the rest, the plane banked left, descending sharply now. Outside, nothing was visible, just thick clouds and night. Inside, Traoré stood tall as the plane began its approach. No seatbelt, no helmet, no fear, just resolve. Because whatever waited for them on the ground, he would face it, standing alive, alert, and unwilling to be anyone's target again. The wheels screeched against the dirt runway, jarring every bone in the aircraft. No lights lined the landing strip, no control tower stood in sight. The secret base, an old Cold War-era facility buried deep in Burkina Faso's eastern corridor, hadn't seen this kind of attention in decades. But tonight, it was the only place secure enough to hold the truth that had just been dragged out of the sky. As the plane taxied to a halt, military trucks surrounded it within seconds. No sirens, no flashes, only floodlights and silent soldiers in black fatigues. The passengers were escorted off under heavy guard, one group at a time. Traoré remained, inside with 5 of his most trusted men, and the assassin. He hadn't spoken since the cabin, not even during the rough landing. But that was about to change. Down in the underground command center, the air was cold and smelled of old metal and oil. The walls were lined with aging maps and faded French signs from colonial days. At the center sat a steel interrogation table, the kind built not just to withstand pressure but to apply it. The assassin was strapped in hands, cuffed to the table ankles, shackled to the chair. Traoré didn't sit. He paced. One of his men placed a thin file on the desk. No name, just a single typed word on the cover, unknown. The silence dragged until Traoré finally broke it. "What's your name?" The man looked up, his face calm but worn. "Helix, that's not a name. That's a code. It's the only one that matters." Traoré's jaw tightened. "Who sent you?" The man blinked once, then looked past Traoré as if speaking to someone only he could see. "I wasn't sent. I was deployed." "By who?" "Not who." "What?" Traoré leaned in slightly. "Try me." The assassin's mouth twitched. Not a smile. More like the beginning of one that died halfway through. "You think this is about you?" "It's not. You're just the symbol. You're the face they can't control." "And who are they?" The man's voice lowered. "Your neighbors, your donors, your trade partners, the ones who held your hand when you were on your knees. Now that you stand, they tighten the leash." Traoré didn't respond immediately. He studied him, then motioned for the soldier standing by the door. A black bag was brought in and placed on the table. From it, the team removed 3 items: a forged Canadian passport, a map with coordinates marked across 6 African cities, and a thick envelope of cash in euros. "These were found in your gear," Traoré said. "Why these cities?" The assassin shrugged. "Stability targets. You weren't the first." Traoré opened the map. One of the cities circled was Bamako, another Accra. The implications hit hard. These weren't random. These were capitals of independent African nations that had rejected military aid from European powers in recent years. "Who pays you?" Traoré pressed. A long pause. "Then people who are afraid of seeing Africa feed itself." The room went cold. "You were going to shoot me, vanish into the clouds, and let my country fall into confusion. That was the plan. Chaos gives shape to control." Helix answered quietly. "Your people love you now, but in confusion they'll trade liberty for bread. That's when the real partners arrive." "Which partners?" The man's lips curled faintly. "You've already shaken their hands." Traoré stared for a long moment. Then he turned away. Get a voice recording. Transcribe every word. Cross-check it with intel. Leaks from Brussels, Geneva, and Lyon. Yes, sir, a soldier replied. Do not take him to a cell. He stays here under 24-hour surveillance. No windows, no media, no names. Yes, sir. As the guards moved to reposition Helix, he looked up again. His tone was calm, but what he said wasn't a threat. It was a promise. You can kill me, but they'll just send another. Maybe someone closer. Maybe someone already inside. Traoré didn't flinch. Then I'll be ready. He walked out of the room, not speaking until the door shut behind him. In the hallway, one of his aides caught up. What do we call this, sir? He asked. An attempted assassination. Traoré replied. Call it what it is. The first shot of a silent war. And deep beneath the surface of a quiet country, the war had begun. But the man standing at the center of it wasn't just a target anymore. He was a wall, and every secret Helix held was about to be turned against the ones who paid him. The room was dim, filled with the soft hum of servers and the faint flicker of screens. Intelligence officers hunched over keyboards, sorting through intercepted messages, encrypted files, and flight logs scraped from 3 continents. Outside, the desert winds blew against the old walls of the hidden base, but inside it was ice. Ibrahim Traoré stood behind a large steel table, arms folded, eyes fixed on a monitor that had just pulled up a file with no clearance tags, no digital fingerprints, and no national seal. It had been buried inside a diplomatic archive shared only with trusted humanitarian partners, except this was no aid report. At the top of the document, Operative Véronique Dessel, Division External Security Director at Brussels, current cover director of European African Agricultural Aid Coalition. A silence fell over the room. Not even the fans dared spin louder. She's not just covering operations, Traoré said finally. She's coordinating them. The head of intelligence, a lean man with a scar over his temple, adjusted his glasses. She's been to Burkina Faso 4 times in the last 2 years, always under the banner of agricultural partnerships. Every visit coincided with disruptions, economic, protests, fuel shortages, rogue media leaks, small contained but coordinated. Traoré didn't sit. He never did when betrayal was involved. She didn't plan the assassination, he said, eyes narrowing. She funded it, authorized it. The trigger puller was Helix, but the finger-pointing was hers. More data flowed in wire transfers. In small amounts, each routed through 3 continents before reaching private accounts linked to security firms in Warsaw, Lisbon, and Marseille. One of those firms had trained mercenaries in counterinsurgency tactics, offering contracts through private stability services, but none of them worked directly for a nation. That was the brilliance and the poison of proxy warfare. A young analyst at the side table raised her hand. Sir, we just decrypted a message chain between Dessel and an EU development attaché in Abidjan. The last message reads, if the captain falls, his army fractures. Focus on the loyalty chain, not the man. Traoré said nothing. He looked out. The small window cut high into the wall. Through the thick glass, the desert was a smear of pale gold. But in his mind, he saw the faces of the men and women who followed him. Not for politics, but for belief. Belief that Africa could stand on its own feet. That Burkina Faso didn't need to beg for partnerships or trade dignity for loans wrapped in conditions. They want a vacuum, he muttered. The room turned to him. A vacuum doesn't stay empty, he continued. It fills with chaos or with what they call stabilization units, but its occupation by another name. The scarred officer spoke again. Do we go public? Traoré shook his head. Not yet. We expose a name without proof. They'll spin it as paranoia. We build the case. We make the truth undeniable. Another analyst slid a tablet across the table. Sir? Her organization is due to host a strategic agricultural forum in Dar next month. 8 presidents confirmed. 2 of them are political rivals of yours. If she speaks there, she controls the narrative.